Aloha everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. Last week there were 3 of us. Today we are so happy to have a 4th special guest. But first of all, this show is called Tuning Up with Iggy and Dave, and I'm Iggy, obviously. Dave, you're on the other side of the hall. How are you doing?
Still Dave. I'm very good. We had a rockin' weekend of performances, didn't we, Iggy?
We did. So happy to have for the 2nd week now of your residency in Hawaii, Maestro Lidiya Yankovskaya.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Welcome back.
How was your first week? Still a lot to discover about Hawaii, I guess.
There certainly is, but great to be in this beautiful hall again to speak to both of you.
Right, live from the Hawaii Theater Center. Anyway, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our very special 4th guest. She is one of the winners of the Nahoku Opio Concerto Competition. It is my pleasure to welcome Erin Nishi. Erin, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's fun to be here.
You said backstage that you're not quite used to speaking publicly or that you get nervous. And first of all, everyone says that, but you always seem very calm and collected and graceful under pressure. Is that something that you've learned through the years unconsciously, or are you perceptive? I feel that you're very perceptive and you observe how artists and teachers behave. I guess I'm digging right into your education. You learn a lot with books and classes, I feel like that. But I feel that you've learned a lot just observing people. Am I right or wrong?
Well, definitely, you're my violin teacher, so I've learned so much from you. But yeah, I think with music, when I perform, especially violin, I don't really have as much nervousness, as much stage fright maybe. I actually started off mainly in piano, and I got really nervous all the time when I performed, especially when I was competing. But violin always felt more natural to me, more like breathing and eating and living, rather than when I speak, sometimes I get very shaky, very stiff. Over the years, I think it's gotten a bit better, hopefully, but I guess it's just practice like anything else.
Maestro, you said last week that you've learned quite many instruments, but you learned piano and violin. Can you relate to what Erin said about being comfortable? Maybe in your case, it was maybe the piano and not the violin, but...
No, actually, I was just thinking as Erin was saying that, because I also was a pianist growing up, and I also studied violin, and I sang throughout, and studied voice and sang. Piano is the only instrument that I still play sometimes professionally, especially during the pandemic. I've ended up doing a bunch of recitals. But interestingly, it's always been the thing that's made me more nervous. I think it's most nervous. I think it's because there are just so many notes. And there's so many things. When you're playing the piano, in a sense, you have to be the orchestra, right? There's so much. It's interestingly, when I conduct, I never get nervous. And I think it's also because my back is to the audience and because I trust the people in front of me to make great music. Really, I'm just there kind of to shepherd everybody along, but the responsibility, of course, is on me also, but I'm not the one making the sound. But it's true, something about the piano also for me. And same with public speaking, I think. It's as musicians, we speak through our instruments and through our music making. I often wonder if that's what makes us want to go into music, that's the way that we can express ourselves most comfortably. And I think often so many musicians are so great at public speaking because we have to do it all the time. But I wonder if so many of us become great at it over time because we have no choice but to become better and better.
I'm the only one on this panel who can only play one instrument. Dave, you play keyboard, harpsichord, piano, you play the viola. Can you also relate to what Maestro and Erin were saying?
I've never performed publicly on the keyboard, so that's just for me and those in the office as well, unfortunately. But I never really had any nerves as a performer at all. And I was remarking, I think it was to Michael Thomas Foumai a few weeks back when Mira was playing with the orchestra. I said to Michael, there is nothing you could give me right now. There's no dollar amount that I would be 18 years old and standing on a stage in front of an orchestra full of musicians. This isn't to make you nervous. This is me personally. But that, I could not go back and do that. And I'm not sure what psychologically, has changed with me, because at that time I would have been completely fine.
What about the public speaking, which is essential in your position at the moment?
Yeah, I think that what I've learned and what I've tried to do in those situations is to just talk like everybody. You're talking individually to everybody in the room, to try to make that connection. And I think that's what, as musicians, we try to do the same thing. You try to tell that story on a one-to-one basis. You said it at the Waikiki Shell, our second week, so eloquently. It doesn't matter that there's only 200 of you out there. If there was one of you or 20 of you, the orchestra would still commit to these performances in the same way.
That's absolutely right. Aaron, so yes, in the effort of disclosure, I have been your teacher the last few years, but there's so many other tutors and mentors and family that you've learned from. Tell us, I'm stealing one line from Dave, but he likes to ask the guest, take us to the beginning. So how you grew up and who your first teachers were and how you became a violinist and so forth.
Right. I started violin when I was 3.5 years old. My mother's brother, my uncle Byron, he's a professional violinist.
He's in Louisiana, correct?
Yes, he plays with the Louisiana Philharmonic. But it was mostly, I think, because my older brother Ryan was playing violin. I accompanied him to some of the Suzuki summer workshops and things that he had went to, and I guess that's how I got started in violin.
Wait, so you started first on violin or piano?
For the longest time, I thought that I started piano when I was 4, but actually my mom told me that I started piano first, and that would make sense, I guess. I remember my grandmother's sister, Ella Masaki, she was my first piano teacher, but really it was my grandmother who was working with me a lot. She was practicing with me, sitting next to me every day, pointing to the music with a chopstick or knitting needle.
And your first violin teacher was?
Miss Mia Lai Carlson. And then I had Miss Helen Higa for many years, maybe 10 years, and then
And so, yes, we'll get to meet later. So there's a great tradition of the Suzuki program at the school that you've been attending, Punahou School, maybe starting with Hiroko Primrose, and who taught, I don't think you were I think you were too young, but Maestro Hiroko Primrose was married to Primrose, I forgot his first name. He played with Yehudi Menuhin. Anyway, Hiroko established a great Suzuki school that Helen Higa continued on. Tell us what you learned from this tradition of Suzuki method.
Wow, Suzuki was just like everything that I learned in the beginning of my violin career, I guess. Not only was it like learning the pieces and learning how to listen and play with other people, but it was a really great community. I made like a ton of my closest friends there, and I had a lot of really great memories with them.
And so not only in Hawaii, but you would go to other places on the mainland and maybe Japan to attend some Suzuki workshops?
Yeah. I went to Seattle many years for the Japan Suzuki Institute, and one year I actually went to Matsumoto, and we played with Mr. Starr. And there's so many people from all over, and it was really cool to meet everyone.
William Primrose is the name that escaped me, and who performed a lot with Yehudi Menuhin.
One of the most famous violas ever. We'll have a talk about that after the show, Iggy.
Yes, we will. Tell us, you parents are not professional musicians. They are in the medical field.
Yes.
So they've been really busy the last few months, I'm sure, and many thanks to the medical corps. My brother's a doctor too. But since I've been teaching you, I know your parents, and I know how passionate your mother is about music. And so your brother Ryan and yourself are very accomplished violinists. Tell us about the influence or the role that parents have sometimes. Sometimes when the parent is a professional musician, they have a clear path for their kids, for better or worse, right? But sometimes the parents who are not musicians, they also have a musical path. In your situation, what was it? Did your mother have? I mean, you have relatives also on your dad's side that are musicians, but I guess to simplify my question, what is it like growing up with parents who are passionate about music?
Well, both my parents are actually very passionate about music on both sides. My dad, actually, when he was young, he was really played a lot of piano. He soloed with orchestras. He played, I think, at the White House. He was maybe more of a musician than my mom was when she was growing up. But I know that my mom, growing up, she had a hard time. She was bullied a lot because she was one of the only Asians at her school.
And so that was in California?
She lived all over the mainland.
Okay.
It was California, I think Connecticut at some point. Even in Japan, she lived for a little bit. But I know that music was like a really great emotional outlet for her. She used music as kind of something that she could fall back onto when she was feeling down. And I can say the same for myself. I think my dad also. Yeah.
Okay. And Maestro, maybe you mentioned it last week. I don't remember. Did you have parents who were supportive, or what was the musical angle for them?
I also come from a family of not professional musicians, but my mom loves music. She studied piano and voice seriously when she was a child and through high school. And although she didn't pursue that, she ended up studying engineering in school, but she just loves music and everything about it. So I was being taken to concerts in particular from as early as I could remember. I was 3, 4, 5 years old, and in St. Peter, I grew up in St. Petersburg, Russia, and there are so many amazing theaters, opera theaters and symphonies and all kinds of performances there. So I remember always being taken to performances. And when my family immigrated to the US, we went to upstate New York to the Albany area. And it's right near Tanglewood, where the Boston Symphony performs in the summers. Also the Saratoga Performing Arts Center, which is the Philadelphia Orchestra's summer home. So again, there was amazing music growing up, and music education also was a huge priority. It makes a difference because I think especially when you're a small kid, it's so hard to, first of all, you need exposure to great performances to be able to understand what it means to perform, but also to get that help and motivation, because if you're just seeing your teacher once a week, in between you often need help. So having someone there who, even if they're not a professional musician, is passionate about it and encouraging makes all the difference in the world.
And I understand your mother would take you to ballet, so music and arts. Aaron, I don't know if you took ballet, but another form of dance that's very important in school for you is I don't know what Puna calls it, but the hula dancing, right? You've been involved ever since you were young?
Yeah, I've been taking hula classes at Punahou, and I've participated in the May Days every year, and then in academy in the high school we call it holoku. So the past two were virtual, but they were still
I remember you had a master class that you had to perform on the violin one Saturday morning, and as soon as you were done with the master class, you had to quickly change clothes for your performance?
Yeah, I had like a long pink skirt and a white top and a flower in my hair somewhere. Yeah, it was a quick change, and then I went to go record for the holoku. It was my final holoku at Punahou.
So, Aaron, we're a few days away from you being on the stage of the Waikiki Shell. What are the emotions right now? Are you excited? Are you nervous? Are you?
Yeah, definitely all of those things. I'm happy. I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to play, especially because this year there wasn't the same kind of concerto concert that we would usually have as seniors at Punahou. I know Mira spoke about that a little bit. I'm still very lucky that I was able to perform with Tommy Yee. He's an amazing pianist. But playing again with orchestra is a pretty big deal. It's a nice thing to be able to play with so many musicians, especially after so many months of pandemic where I wasn't able to do that. Yeah.
Lidiya, for what advice would you have for Aaron?
And let me interject for a second.
Yes.
You won the Maui Chamber Orchestra concerto competition some years ago, so you've actually performed the Mendelssohn concerto with that chamber orchestra. So, in line with what Dave, based on your own experience of performing with an orchestra, what would you tell a maestro?
What would I? Oh, I don't really know. I'm going to try my very best to count and stay steady, and I don't know. I'm very
Well, I'll
excited
do my
to work
very
with
best
you.
to follow what you're doing and to match your interpretation of it. So I think that's the only thing we can do as musicians. But in terms of kind of greater advice, I would say do what feels right to you and not what you think you're supposed to do. And I think this goes for music making, for life, for whatever. I think so often we get stuck pursuing certain paths because we are told those are the paths we're supposed to be pursuing. But to me personally, and especially within music, I've always been most thankful for the things that I did because they felt right to me and they felt authentic to me and who I am and what I wanted to achieve and what I wanted to say to the world.
It's going to be a spectacular experience, a little bit different because it'll be outdoors. So the acoustics is something that we might have to adjust to. Tell us about why you think, okay, two questions. How you came about to learn the Mendelssohn through your young life, and why do you think people love that concerto? Why do you think it's so famous? I know it's a simple question, not always easy to answer, but anyway, those two questions to you.
Yeah. Actually, my older brother Ryan, performed the Mendelssohn concerto as his senior concerto.
At school.
Yeah. When in his last year, so 2018, I guess. And I performed it as a sophomore the next year. It was my oji-chan, my mother's father's favorite piece. And so she would listen to it all the time growing up, and she heard it so much. And I think my mother came to love the piece, and then my brother came to love the piece, and I did too.
And so how old were you when you first learned that?
I had to learn it right after coming back from a music injury. So I learned it in about a month before the competition, the audition in my sophomore year. Yeah.
Yeah, so you just mentioned your music injury, and that is important because we think of young kids, young students just being able to perform 8 hours and practice 8 hours a day, but I don't know if you know that every week the first thing I ask you is if you've got enough sleep, because I know you practice and you have so many exams and tests and whatnot, and this is truly a source of concern for me. And if you could remember just one thing for college, is that please remember that sleep is very important.
He asked me the same thing, so don't worry.
Yes, unfortunately it's true. I do hope that Dave gets plenty of sleep too. So there was a moment in was that in your sophomore year, I think, where you had to actually take it easy because my interpretation is that it wasn't just that you were practicing so much and forcing things, but there were so many things going on with school that it was maybe a way of your body telling you, you gotta take care of it. Tell us about that experience. What happened?
Yeah, I hope I don't concern you. I didn't get very much sleep last night, but yeah, it was before the Hawaii, the MTNA competition, right? And in that week, I was also preparing for an audition for an orchestra. I flew to the mainland like the week before. I flew to California to take an audition. I came back and I was preparing all these excerpts, and then I was preparing my concerto pieces, my competition pieces, right? And I think I remember being really busy with school. I was very stressed out at that time. But right before the competition, I just started practicing like the same maybe 3 measures or 4 measures for like 2 hours. And by the end of it, I realized that it was painful to vibrate up high on the G string. So I was a little bit concerned. I was kind of scared, especially just because I wasn't really used to it. And I didn't know what was happening, but right after I finished that competition, I just stopped.
Your body collapsed. And so how long did it take to kind of get back to fully practicing?
So I had a month where I just didn't practice at all. And I was working with a physical therapist for a little while, and I had all of this schedule that I had to get back on. And they said in the beginning, like 5 minutes of practice, and then 5 minutes, and then take a 10-minute break, and then 5 minutes. And it took a while to get back up to a regular amount of practice again. But I think more than just physically taking breaks and stuff, I had to think about it from a mental standpoint. When I was practicing, I had to really focus on what I was doing to get the most out of the minutes and the strength that I was using. Rather than just kind of practicing aimlessly. Yeah.
Absolutely. Maestro, have you got through those type of situations?
Yeah, and it's so great that you're talking about this, because I think this is something that people are not aware of. And the number of musicians, I think most musicians experience an injury of some point in their lives, and many leave the industry or stop being musicians as a result because there's not enough support. What we do is so physical. And so many of us also spend so much time practicing and doing these repetitive actions and maybe not spending as much time using our bodies in other ways. So it's so important. So many of my conducting colleagues have major injuries. It's something that I'm very aware of and have managed to avoid. But as a pianist, I remember when I was in university, when I was in college, I learned the Rachmaninoff Second Piano Concerto, which was a beast, of course, that I spent so many hours in a practice room trying to reach all of the octave and a half reaches that Rachmaninoff required for, and I hurt both my pinkies. Actually, I strained my pinky fingers, which is problematic. I also had some vocal injuries when I was in high school. I was a singer, and that had more to do with the language change because I was starting to lose my Russian accent, and vocal placement is very different in different languages. It's not just your accent and how you pronounce the words, but it's where in your body you put the language. Russian, everything's a little lower, a little more open. English is farther up and higher. So just as with any other language, French, for instance, is very forward, right? So I was placing English where I was speaking Russian, and I ended up with major vocal issues. And I spent 6 months in speech therapy also, like doing slow exercises. But it's a beautiful thing. It's like what you said about forcing you to practice efficiently as a result. In a way, having an injury when you're young forces you to, first of all, be aware of your own limitations and to think about your body and how you use it, but also to use your time well, because it's easy to get carried away and just spend those 2 hours on the same 4 bars, even if that's not productive after a point. But it's important, and I hope this is a conversation that people continue to have, and it's great that you clearly are aware of this with your students, but with young musicians and young people in general, because it's our bodies are what we need to make this happen, to express, and if we're not totally aware of taking care of them, well, we won't be able to express anything.
And Aaron, you have the alertness and maturity to realize, and hopefully, well, not hopefully, but based on your experience, you can maybe tell the younger generation how to live through those experiences. Russian, French, and English. What about Scottish? Dave, can you introduce one of the pieces on the program?
Yes, I'm not sure we're the next island over, my people. But yeah, we have the Scottish Symphony on Mendelssohn's Scottish Symphony on the program this week. Why is it called the Scottish Symphony?
Yeah, so actually during Mendelssohn's lifetime, he did not call this, but he wrote the piece, or started writing the piece, I should say, while on a trip to Scotland. It's the same trip during which he wrote the Hebrides Overture, the famous Hebrides Overture. And we have some letters from him where he describes writing the Scottish Symphony and being inspired by the Scottish landscape. He actually didn't finish it until years later. I think he even wrote the Italian Symphony in between and then kind of finished the Scottish one later. But later scholars ended up referring to it as the Scottish Symphony because there are aspects of it that remind you of maybe the storms or the sea or certain cultural things that harken back to Scotland. But I wonder, it's hard to know what Mendelssohn would think of our calling it the Scottish Symphony, since he did not refer to it that way. I love the piece because I think it has so much nuance and depth. It's totally different from the violin concerto also, because even though they're by the same composer, when I think about the violin concerto, to me there's a bittersweetness to it that it hits you in a certain way emotionally. I think that's why it's so beloved. The Scottish Symphony, I think, is it's more cerebral in certain ways, in other ways it's heavier. And it's a piece that I think is at times triumphant and at times digs a little more deeper into heavier kind of moments emotionally.
Before we talk about the other work on the program, the Michael Thomas Foumai music from the Castle of Heaven, which there's some interesting correlations between Bach and Mendelssohn, and not Scottish, Bach and Mendelssohn. Iggy, what's it going to be like? How many times have you played the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto as the soloist?
I've played it a few times.
What's it going to be like just a few feet away from the soloist?
Well, you want to be with the conductor. You're part of I don't want to sound so business-minded, but you're part of a product. Mm. It's not such a great artistic term, but it's the soloist, it's the conductor, and it's the orchestra. And so even though most eyes will be focused on the soloist, you want to make sure that you provide the right colors for the soloist, and you don't want to go against the grain. And so it's always a great experience. I would think that this week will be even more special because it's Aaron, who I've known for a number of years, and whatever legacy I've learned from my own teachers, I've tried to pass on to Erin, and hopefully whatever she's learned from me, she can pass on to her. It doesn't have to be students, but to her friends or so forth. So I think that extra layer of human bond, the human tie, makes it extra special to see your student. Yeah, so it's very much looking forward to it. And
not one student, but two, because Michael Thomas Foumai was also.
Yeah, so, well, Michael was a violin student at UH, so, and I had the privilege of teaching him at UH. He didn't stay with me as long as Aaron because he was already in college and they were only a couple years, but yeah, so you know, it's about trying to perpetuate, like Rayate Helm was saying, perpetuate whatever you learned to the younger generation. Aaron, we're going to move on to the Michael Thomas Foumai piece for orchestra, but you also have your own personal experience. So as an outgoing senior, you audition for colleges, and so you had a chance to work with Michael, who recommended a piece of his. And can you tell us about that experience?
Right. So for most of my auditions, there's just a standard repertoire. You play, Paganini or solo, Bach, and then a concerto movement and things like that. But for Thornton School of Music at USC, they asked for modern composers still living, BIPOC composer. And I was looking around through different music, and then I realized Mr. Michael Thomas Foumai is from Hawaii, and I've worked with him before, and I emailed him and I asked if I could. He so generously just gave me the music. I asked if I could buy it from him, but he just gave me the music, and I auditioned with that. And the judges really enjoyed the piece. They were very excited to hear it.
That's great. That's great. And who knows, I know you want to pursue not just music, but you have so many. What is it that you gave? You gave in Japan some sort of talk, and you didn't perform. What did you talk about?
I went to a poster presentation lecture thing in Tokyo, and I talked about cervical cancer in adolescent females, about like pap smears. I did a research project on that.
And Dave, what have you been doing?
Well, so right now, today, what's your goal?
My goal is to, very broad, give back to my community at some point, somehow. Right now, the story that I'm trying to, reach for is I want to research the effects of music on brain development, especially working with senior citizens and in underprivileged children. I know that there's some research already in senior citizens where it's helping with Alzheimer's and memory and bringing back these core memories that they have from when they're little, even if they're losing some of that mental process. And in younger children, especially in underprivileged areas, they're saying that music education helps them to be more motivated in school, and it's bringing up their grades and things like that. And I think it's really, really interesting. So I hope to go into the mind and music kind of research.
I cannot tell you how much we need the work that you are set out to do here, and what, first of all, congratulations on your recent graduation. I understand you graduated from Punahou this past Saturday, so congrats on that. We always end the show usually talking about, what's the future of classical music look like, or symphonic music, and it's right here. It's an inspirational mind like yours that really understands the work that we're trying to do for a community. So congrats, and so looking forward to the performance this week. But Michael Thomas Foumai,
Yes.
let's talk about.
Maestro, why don't we let
Yes.
you talk about the Michael Thomas Foumai piece?
Yeah, well, Music from the Castle of Heaven, it was inspired by a title of a book about Bach, actually. And Dave mentioned the connection between Bach and Mendelssohn as well, which exists on this program, because Mendelssohn was a big proponent of Bach's music and really brought it to the world at a time that it wasn't as well known, but it was forgotten to an extent. So, but the piece was inspired by a book about Bach, but Michael speaks about it as really a work that describes that phrase, music from the castle of heaven. What does that mean? What would it mean if the heavens, if the sky, if everything that is above us spoke to us through music? And to me, the way I described it to Michael the other day, and I'm not sure if he liked this description or not, but to me, it's this piece that has a Wagnerian scope to it, and that it's this long developing kind of one single phrase that just keeps going over the entire work, but with textures that are almost Debussy, often transparent, often something totally different. We have something that shows us a clear sky and the sun, and then these kind of lightning bolts or these storm clouds that come through in the middle of it. We really see all of the grandeur and the beauty of what is above us, which I think is very exciting.
And it will be above us because we're outdoors at the Waikiki Shell.
Yes, well, and also there's a connection to the Scottish Symphony because so much of the Scottish Symphony, of what we understand, if its origins, was inspired also by nature, by storms, by the Scottish rain, the famous Scottish rains. Again,
there will be no rain or storms at the Waikiki
knock
Shell.
on, on the wood. Yeah, absolutely. But it's that idea, and if there are, they will complement our music making, hopefully. But it's that idea of nature inspiring music, which of course it has always and will continue to forever, I'm sure.
Well, I am very much looking forward to the performances this Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and I hope there's still tickets available. I'll tell you, we've had a lot of ticket requests from Aaron's friends and family, so hurry and get those last remaining tickets for the Waikiki Shell performances this week. We're so thrilled to have you on the performance with the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto, and congratulations. And we're excited for you to come back to Hawaii and lead the Hawaii Symphony Orchestra, so just let me know when you're ready. And Lidiya, it's been wonderful to have you here for 2 weeks, and looking forward to the performances this weekend.
That's right.
Iggy, what else?
Thank you so much. Lidiya, it's been a great 2 weeks, and hope you'll be back soon. And Aaron, always, I will treasure my years with you, and looking forward to seeing you every time you come back here.
Well, join us next Tuesday for a very special guest. I'm not sure who that is at the moment, I'll admit, but we had a couple of very interesting, excuse me?
I know
Oh,
who
he
it
knows.
is, but yeah.
He knows. Okay, Iggy's not telling me. It's a surprise. Join us next Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. for Tuning Up with Iggy and Dave. Thank you all for the support, and we'll see you at the Shell this weekend. Aloha.